Photography Online, the podcast.
Coming up, we discuss whether AI is harming the planet, why taking a selfie is now banned in parts of Las Vegas, and we reveal the product which officially has the world's worst title. We debate why the photography industry is largely male-dominated, and ask what's the point of back-button focus. We then look at a few new products and ask, does the world really need an AI camera, a motorised tripod, a panoramic digital camera, and a lamp? I've got two of the team with me here, so let's get the wheels in motion.
And now, please welcome your hosts for this episode of the Photography Online podcast. A man whose images are so fresh, he keeps his camera gear in the fridge. It's Harry Martin.
Oh, that's me, hello.
And a man who had his toenails surgically removed so he wastes no time having to cut them. It's James McCormick.
Can't reach my toenails anymore anyway.
And here to keep them both in check, a woman I'm told needs no introduction.
Oh, well, that's nice, isn't it? No introduction. Well, anyway, I am Ruth. Here's my introduction. I'll have to do it for myself. Welcome to the Photography Online podcast. I'm here to try and keep some sort of order today. We, of course, have got Harry in the studio with us for the first time. He's brushed his hair, especially for the occasion. Harry, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. It's good to be here.
And James, of course, who tells me he's put on his best socks. I'm not quite sure either of these guys are getting the whole podcast concept. But anyway, welcome back, James.
I'm afraid that's a complete lie. I am sockless, Ruth.
Oh, we didn't really want to know that. We don't want to imagine. This is the whole idea of the podcast. We can't see anything, so don't make us think about anything. Anyway, we've got a great podcast coming up for you today over the next 60 minutes or so. Starting off with some interesting photography-related news articles. The guys have been trawling through online. I'm sure newspapers. Do we have newspapers anymore for photography? No, we don't.
Not for photography, but I still read a paper daily.
Oh, right, okay. Good to know. Well, photography news, basically, the guys have come up with a few items that have kind of, struck them this month. First story, Harry, what have you found?
Well, we talked a lot about AI and sort of fake images on our recent live show, which got me digging a little bit. And I started to read, and, I'm very environmentally minded about a lot of things. And I thought, well, what's the impact of all of this AI-generated imagery? Long story short, turns out not great. Let me just read you a couple of statistics I've pulled out from a few news stories. So, first of all, just the power and processing required to get some of these algorithms and programs running and off the ground. So you have to train them. And to do that, so one of the programs, GPT-3, doesn't mean anything to me. Apparently it has 175 billion parameters, so different things that it could possibly look into. Now, that consumed just over 1,000 megawatt hours of electricity, but it generated 552 tons of CO2. Now, that doesn't mean anything really to the everyday punter. That's the equivalent of 123 petrol-powered passenger cars driving for 1 year.
Well, just to put a rainbow over the top of a unicorn
Pretty
in
much.
Someone's...
That's just the training for these programs.
Wow.
And then once they're up and running, then you've got the continual investment in energy and processing power in order to actually generate these prompts when people go and type in, make a picture of James McCormick look half handsome. That's probably going to crash half the world's coal-burning furnaces. That's just one small algorithm in terms of training. So you think about everything scaled together with all these different companies. It's a pretty big impact in terms of emissions.
So what you're saying there, Harry, is basically computer power sucking energy out of the grid, as we call it in the UK anyway, just to get up and learn itself what to do. And then once somebody requests something, a rainbow over a unicorn on the old man of store with a handsome Harry next to it, that requires even more power just to then generate it.
Exactly, yeah.
And this is nothing to do with storing images in the cloud or anything like this. This is just AI-powered technology, the new big thing of 2024.
Yeah. So that's just one small example of one small training program. Then, I could go further and we could study. So, you'll know a little bit about these big data centers, James.
More statistics. Come on, Harry. We like statistics.
Well, so with these big data centers, all this processing power, it takes a lot of cooling. And so the water consumption of these big powerhouse units is colossal. So again, another statistic I've got here, a research team found that ChatGPT, which is probably the most well-known of these programs and algorithms at the moment, uses the equivalent of a 500 millimeter bottle of water for each conversation.
Wow.
So you imagine how many millions of people are now using, there's a phone app for it now. So people are just going on there, and every time somebody goes on and just does a random series of prompts, that's a bottle of water. You might as well just be throwing it out the window.
I was using that an awful lot last month. I'm feeling very, very bad now. How many bottles of water did I go through?
But the magazine's going to be brilliant this year now, finally. So in essence, Harry, what you're saying really is AI bad for the environment? Well, most things are bad for the environment, right? Just being alive is not great for the environment. So what can we do to alleviate these things? That's the big question before we go on to talk about actual cloud storage and things like that, which is all closely linked after all. But AI itself, do we really need to use it, I suppose, is the big question. And if so, Ruth admits that she uses it, so for a good purpose. But, where does one draw the line? I suppose it's a personal choice, is it not?
Oh, absolutely. And I think the trouble is the cat's out of the bag. So there's no putting away this, magical tool of AI. It's here to stay. The easiest solutions would just make it all renewable. I mean, that seems a relatively easy solution, but you yourself will know from having photographed some of these big data centers that a lot of them aren't, and it doesn't seem to be as a very quick take up.
They're certainly moving in the right direction. There's no question about that, and they do all sorts of things as to their positioning towards prevailing winds and things like that. And water harvesting is a huge thing, and it's all moving in the right direction. But my knowledge of them is limited to a very small corner of the world, i.e. Britain. I don't know what goes on in the rest of the world. So across America and Asia, which is where most of them sit. So I guess, in essence, as you said, the cat is out of the bag. It's moving forward. There's not a lot we can do about that. But if, in the same way, I presume that when you go shopping, you try and shop reasonably, for want of a much better word, ethically. We don't all spend our days pushing whales back into the sea like you do. So, but we can all have a conscience to do with that, I suppose, and just be aware, I'm guessing is what you're saying, is each time that you use chat, whatever, I don't, me, I'm a dinosaur, so I'd be extinct by now anyway. What was it, chat, whatever?
ChatGPT, probably the most well-known one.
So every time you use it, if you're going to use it, then think before you use it. Now, I guess that it's the very same principle as cloud storage anyway. So
it's at the end of the day, it's all ICT, which is what I knew it at school, information communication technology. This is the biggest industry, and it will be the biggest industry in the world, and it's probably going to be the biggest emissions emitter very, very quickly. So it's something I think we do need to think about. But in terms of what you and I can do, not a lot. Well,
don't use AI unless it's strictly necessary, which it very rarely ever is, unless you really need help writing scripts, Ruth.
Yeah.
Or the other thing that you can do is not upload pictures to the cloud, because it's exactly the same servers that do it. So it's exactly the same computing technology. So, what you are going to upload to the cloud, just think very carefully as to whether you really need to or not. Just not randomly upload absolutely everything. So every time you press a button on your phone, a picture goes up there, because that is having it's leaving a footprint, isn't it? And it's one that we wouldn't necessarily always think that it does. You kind of think, well, at least we're not pouring chemicals around anymore. We're just pressing a button and it's going to the cloud, and that's fine. Well, not necessarily. It's not as fine as we think it is. And the pouring chemicals things around opens quite an interesting debate. I'm not sure what you think about it, but, in the old days of film photography where, the film would have to be actually produced and then developed and then, in theory, dried, processed and stored in archive quality, hopefully archive quality anyway, paper or plastics, was that better or worse than it is now? Let's talk about letting the cat out of the bag. That's quite a thought to have, really, that actually the old way might be the better way.
Forget the rabbit warren. We've somehow disappeared down the Channel Tunnel. Well, yeah, I don't know. I've got no idea when it comes to the film industry as to what that environmental impact may be. In theory, you would think it's such a small scale in comparison that if we truly wanted to be environmentally conscious about all of this, then we should all just go and shoot film, and then we're not using all of this processing power, and we're just using hard materials, as it were.
Yeah, no, I reckon that the genuine answer to this is that if we shot the same amount of film as we do digital pictures, it would be probably worse. I mean, we're speculating here, wildly speculating, but the difference with film was that you tended to be more, you were careful every time you press the button, and that is probably the key to this, that there's nothing wrong with digital, there's absolutely nothing wrong with using, cloud storage or even AI for certain things, but just be careful the amount you use it for, because it doesn't come without its own set of consequences for the environment.
Yep, I think you're right. I think it's all a case of usage and scale. It's a difficult one.
Bit more film. You're going to make Marcus very happy, I think.
Oh yeah, no, that might have been a bit of a disaster of a conversation there, Harry, because now the great lumbering Neanderthal of Marcus is going to be banging on about film. I mean, he's got a point. We all do quite like film, but it's just when he talks about it, it's just,
Yeah, let's leave that one behind. Listen, last month, if you're listening to the podcast, we had a selfie-related news story. We've got another one, actually, because there's always seems to be selfies in the news. A new law has banned tourists from stopping to take selfies on pedestrian bridges along the Las Vegas Strip. Or you can either get, I think it's 6 months in jail or a $1,000 fine. Now, obviously, guys, we have been in places like Venice where, obstructing the flow of people has been a real issue, people stopping to take pictures on bridges and stuff. But what's your take on this new Las Vegas story?
Well, I mean, when you were first reading that out, you said there's a new law stopping tourists, and I thought you were going to stop there, which would have been absolutely brilliant. That would have been the first place to stop. But of course, we are all tourists ourselves. So, I mean, I'm all in favour of it. But I don't know, it's a little bit of control freakery going on. And blimey, run through what the penalties were? They seemed a little on the harsh side.
Yeah, I think it was $1,000 fine or up to 6 months in jail. God,
which of those would you choose, Harry?
Well, it's winter here at the moment. It's blowing 90-mile-an-hour winds. I'd rather be in Las Vegas for 6 months in a nice, comfortable jail. Yeah, exactly. Someone to spoon at night.
Well, I'll take the grand, thank you very much, and be on my way. No, I don't know really. I mean, the implementation of it is, we use the word rabbit warren to go down. I don't quite know how they'd implement it, really. I'd just pretend I didn't speak English if I was there and just babble, which is my go-to every time I get stopped by law enforcement anyway. I just pretend to be a bumbling idiot, and they tend to let you go at that point.
There's no pretending.
But it is a good point, and it's not just relevant to the selfies as well. It's relevant to us photographers, as it were, blocking honeypot locations and putting down tripods. And I think in the end, is it not just a case of everyone just being slightly nicer to each other, and then law enforcement, the FBI, the CIA, the whatever, DEA, whatever it is in America that's going to be taking the lead on this? I think it's probably just the local sheriff. But anyway.
Might be the DEA in your case, James.
Thank you very much. Or the ATF, actually, is probably slightly more.
Yeah. But so their reasoning... I was reading the wording of this law and the press release about it.
Research, Harry. You've done research.
I've always got to be good and well prepared. But what does it say? So it says the measure is intended to reduce crime and increase public safety.
Well, that's written by a bureaucrat using ChatGPT to generate it.
Well, exactly, yeah. How much water went down the drain there? But so it's not really about the photographs as such. It's just people loitering, isn't it?
Yep.
And I don't see how it's going to reduce crime. If you want to reduce crime, then tackle crime. Don't stop people.
Is it, or maybe are pickpockets maybe coming along when people are stopped taking pictures? I don't know. Maybe there was a
that's like telling people not to go out at night because there's crime. I mean, you can't go down that road. So I hope it's not that reason. So I don't know. I just feel that from a photographer's point of view, if you're there taking a selfie anyway, well, yes, you should be moved along, because for all the reasons we discussed on the last episode, and also what we were just discussing, sending your stupid selfies up to the great cloud in the sky and not doing any damage. And if it's photographers themselves that are stopping to take pictures, then the photographers should just take a little bit more responsibility maybe and just keep moving. because it can be annoying.
Yeah, there's never a shortage of selfie-related news articles, so we'll keep an eye on them. I'm sure there might be some a common theme running here as we do the podcasts.
And stay clear of American law enforcement.
Well, that as well, yes.
Well, funnily enough, Ruth, it reminded me, because last time I was in America, I think it might have been with Marcus actually, I got stopped for jaywalking. So there you
Really?
are. Yes, by a sheriff. On a white horse, a female sheriff on a white horse in an all-in-one white outfit with a big silver six-shooter and a big white Stetson.
I think you're talking about a dream you had.
No,
say,
it very much
you
was
weren't
not a dream. I
dreaming?
was crossing the road to buy a shirt and, and she went, "Oi, you."
James, I don't think she was a police officer.
She
I think she was probably a stripper.
Harry, that's outrageous. No, she very much was. But anyway, I got you. And you asked how I got out of these situations. I got out of it by being terribly British, saying I'm terribly sorry, but I was rather smitten.
Right, okay, let's definitely move
Powerful
on.
thighs.
Move on. Another story that we've come across this month. Teenagers are apparently covering their faces now in family photographs in a new Generation Z trend, or Generation Z if you're listening from the US, known as the nose cover pose. This has actually been given a name, which is remarkable. The basic concept is they don't want to be involved, but rather than saying no, they're just putting their hand in front of their face at the moment that the picture is taken. It's an interesting article because it kind of, the person who's written this has kind of basically said, teenagers are feeling a bit hard done by, and when you're a teen, it's kind of that awkward phase. You don't want to be seen in pictures, but they're having to do it anyway. So my initial take on this was, that's just a little bit rude, isn't it? But what about you guys? What do you think of this?
Well, being a teenager is tough, isn't it? I mean, I'm only just out of that phase before you say it, and kids and teenagers particularly don't need any reasoning whatsoever to, belittle or make fun of your appearance. So you imagine a slightly awkward family photograph where, I don't know, you've got a droopy eye or, your mouth's open or, anything. So trying to prevent that and giving yourself a little bit of protection online, I think, as it were, at the end of the day, it's up to them, isn't it? It's no bad thing, in my opinion, rather than maybe some disgruntled parents for ruining family photographs.
I thought for a second when you said a slightly closed eye and a droopy jaw, you were throwing to me for a second there, Harry. But anyway. But when I saw it and I thought Generation Z covering their faces, I immediately thought it was to cover up spots, and I thought the Z was for zits. So I completely misread that story to start with. But I think it's a bit of a shame, really. We all get being a teen. We've all been teens quite a long time ago in some of our cases. So family pictures didn't really, my family never wanted pictures of me anyway. So they
weren't called teenagers in your day, were they, James? They were probably just youths still.
I know, yeah. We had to sit still for 3.5 minute exposures for the family snapshot back in my day.
3.5 weeks for the painting.
That is true. There is a family painting actually, but anyway,
of course.
No, I just think that in the end, it's of course, kids have a right to cover their faces if they want, but actually the parents should just give them a clip around the ear and tell them to get on with it. But then the main reason for that is that it's all very well now covering your face and expressing your right to be, a teen in 2024 or whatever. But when you're 10 years, 20 years down the line, you've got your own family. I think there will be a degree of regret that you can't actually see yourself. And the picture's not necessarily for you, it's for others. But Harry did touch upon the point about pictures being online and teenagers not wanting to be seen online or being teased or whatever it might be. And I think that's all very valid. But I guess in the end, it's about usage, really, and reassuring people of the usage of the image. But it is a bit of a shame, and I hope that it's a trend that goes away. And I hope that any parent that has a teen that wants to cover their face actually explains why it's important to be documented. It's not for now, it's for future generations, really. So because if ever I get to have grandchildren or something, but they wouldn't want to see the family portrait that's been painted with my face covered with my own hand, would they? So
no, I think that is a good point. Yeah,
it's actually been cut. It was actually, the face was cut out by my sister actually with a Stanley knife, but that's a different story.
And we've just come off of talking about AI and all the rest of it. It's not particularly difficult now to tell a program to pop in, the face of your beloved one with their hand covering their face and tell it to remove the face. The new...
Remove the face?
Oh, swap the face for one before.
Remove the hand, sorry, swap the hand. That's what I mean.
Yeah. That's a very good point. Yeah, it would do that, wouldn't it?
But the new Google phone, I think, has got I think it's Google. I get lost with all the new phones. But, you tap a button, it takes a series of photographs, and it will automatically choose the best expression and the best face out of the series of images to create the AI composite of the best of the scene. So, it's very easy to get around something like holding a hand in front of your face or looking away from the camera or something like that, because there are all these tools now, whether they're right or wrong, to overcome that. So it's almost a bit of a futile gesture, I think.
All right, well, one final story, Harry, that you found, which was quite interesting. Obviously, we're fairly near the beginning of the year, and there was a lot of kind of wrap-up stuff of 2023. Worst product name, no, not worst product of the year, worst product name of the year, because I remember the first digital camera I got was the Canon 400D, and I remember hearing that in America it was called the Rebel, and thinking, oh, it was just Americans, having a bit of fun with the product names. But actually there is a huge lack of imagination, I think, with a lot of camera and gear names over here, and this one takes the biscuit. Why don't you tell us what it is?
Oh, it's a good one, right? Let me read the full title for you. So it's a new lens that's come out, and it is the Panasonic Leica DG Vario Elma 100 to 400 millimeter f4 to 6.3 Mark II ASPH power optical image stabilization.
I want one. It's got power. I want one.
It's quite a mouthful. It doesn't exactly just roll off the tongue, does it? And I think this is an increasing issue with new lenses coming out, new models coming out, different versions of the same lens with slightly differing features, where the only differentiation in the name and the difference between them is a letter or a designation in the title of the lens. So you might have a Sigma springs to mind, for example. They've got the different lines, the sport, the art. That's a little bit easier to understand. There's plenty of.
Well, Sigma have done it quite well, like that, sport, art, and contemporary, haven't they? So at least they've narrowed it down to 3.
Yeah, very clear differences. Whereas otherwise, you've just got all of these seemingly random letters just thrown into the title of the lens. It doesn't do much to help the image of photography
help the consumer, basically, who's making a choice. And it's an interesting thing, isn't it, really? Because if you think of who's the biggest camera manufacturer of the last decade, who's sold billions more than anyone else, Apple. And they just have a phone, and I know they went through a brief phase of putting S or something on the end of it or whatever, but basically, roughly the iteration of the phone by the number after it, iPhone 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, whatever we're up to now. So it's very straightforward to know where you are in the pecking order of, how new that phone is. And I understand clearly that, there's slightly different models with Apple phones and things like that. But basically it's nice and simple, and they do really well with their marketing because of it. And I think the other manufacturers could probably learn a thing or two from that, really. Because what you just read out is ludicrous.
Oh, absolutely. And what I do love, further on in this news story, just to show some sort of ways that naming can be done a little bit differently, and I never realised this. So some of it's not Olympus anymore, it's OM System, of course. They had their line of lenses, I'm probably not pronouncing this correctly, the Zuiko lenses, Zuiko. I didn't know that means light of the gods.
Oh, I should buy one of those then, shouldn't I?
Yeah, capital letters all across your lens. And I believe Nikon, on one of their lenses, has now got the Czech word for diaper on one of their lenses.
Oh, that's brilliant. That is absolutely.
Why?
Well, I'll leave that to the listener's imagination. I know what we think of most Nikon stuff, but
there is actually. Anyway, there is a true story, Harry, relevant to Namibia, where, of course, you've just finished doing your recce. And Namibia and Botswana border, but, hey, to segue it and squeeze it in here, I'll say Namibian, but it's actually slightly Botswana, where the World Health Organization to their credit, put lots and lots of big ball posters up saying, when you go to bed with a lady, wear a condom. Quite right too. We're all for that. We're all for, advertising safe sex. Except they used the local dialect word for condom, which meant socks.
Amazing.
So everyone in that part of Africa is going to bed like an Englishman.
No, it's probably
on.
a safe spot to rapidly move on.
I was going to say, let's end our news stories there with a bit of class, of course, as ever, from James. And we're going to move on to...
The big question. It's a question, and it's big.
Yes, it is. Okay, the big question this week is, why is the photography industry male-dominated?
Whoa.
I'm talking to two guys, of course, so I might interject throughout this, but we'll go for it.
That's nice and light-hearted, isn't it? Jeez.
That's why we call it the big question.
Straight off the back of that sort of slightly comical jingle as well, we come on to something that's actually quite serious and open for debate. But I think, Harry, the only person that should really lead away with this is you, because I'm an old dinosaur.
Well, I won't disagree there, but I definitely agree the industry is male-dominated. It's something that I think most photographers will have noticed at some point. You know, you go to your local camera club, and I would bet that 70, 80, 90% of the members, if not all of them, are probably males of a particular generation. And that's who camera clubs appeal to. Now, we run workshops and trips in Scotland and across the world, and I think we're slightly more fortunate that we do see a bit more of a split in the demographic on our trips, but it's definitely still more male dominated.
Not a huge amount more, though, to be fair, I think, in our trips. But in the professional world, I think it's a different matter.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think it ties into almost all industries and the way the world has been run for a long time, in that the confidence for female photographers is just not been there. You know, why try and throw themselves into this egotistical, which, you know, photography is a very egotistical environment. I don't think anyone can disagree when you get wrapped up in award-winning photographers and you know, sometimes the machoism that surrounds it, that it's not exactly a welcoming place for women, is it?
Well, I think there's a couple of things that spring to mind, really. And I think that we should delineate between amateur, for want of a much, much better word, photographers, or non-professional photographers and professional photographers. So that's something that we should first think about. Secondly, there's sort of genres of photography as well, from landscape to wedding photography or whatever. So I think those, if you were to break down those areas, the demographics would be slightly different within those areas of male to female. But nonetheless, I agree that, of course, there are more male photographers in most genres than female photographers. Then there's the question of tech and using tech. And it is only in relatively recent times that that tech has become more accessible and more of interest to ladies. But the big question really is, what is a photographer here? Because in essence, is it somebody who can work tech, or is it somebody who can hike up a mountain quicker than potentially somebody who can't? Although whenever I've been out with people, it's always been the ladies that have been to the top of the mountains long before the gents anyway. So, but I think that the main question is, what is a photographer? And I think without a shadow of a doubt, the best photographers I've ever seen in the non-professional environment have been ladies. There's no question. Have been female. There's no question about that whatsoever. They think more creatively. I mean, I don't know whether that's a fact, a scientific fact or whatever, but they certainly think more creatively. They think more laterally, and that tends to make better photographers altogether anyway. So, and I'm sure over time that will, as in many other industries, that will, you know, cross over into the professional commercial world as well. So us fellas better watch out, because the ladies are, sure as anything, they're coming to get us. There's no question.
Well, so we know that they must be out there, and I know plenty, and I follow plenty of them on social media. But when you go to big photographic competitions, the largest competitions around the world, whether it's landscape or wildlife or commercial photography, I would say 95% of the awarded names are going to be male.
Well, I suspect that the pictures are being judged not quite as artistically as they should be. And I suspect that, you can sometimes I could probably tell a picture that's taken by a lady as opposed to taken by a gent in a certain situation anyway, not across the board, but if you were, pointing a camera at a particular vista, let's say, you could probably tell the one that was slightly generically taken by a man and taken by a woman. And I suspect that the better picture, the more artistic, the more storytelling, the more, I don't know, the picture with a certain je ne sais quoi as a generalisation would have been taken by the lady as opposed to taken by a guy who's just pleased to have got his f-stops in the right order or something.
I mean, disagree if you want, guys, but I would say that women take a lot more photographs than men do in general. They tend to just do it maybe on their phones. And do you think that there's anything, I mean, you touched on it before, but perhaps the cameras themselves, the gear, the names, as we just talked about, getting to that level, maybe they don't see the point of doing it. Maybe they're just not that interested in gear. But I would say in general, women have got a more creative eye. That's a sweeping statement, obviously. But in general, women are the ones out there with their phones, taking pictures of their kids, taking pictures. When I lead people on hikes, women have got their phones out all the time. The guys might have a big camera, but the percentage of guys to women actually taking images, women in general, they're the ones, they're interested, they want to do it, but it doesn't go often past doing it for yourself.
So I think you're completely right, Ruth, to be honest with you. And I think what you're touching upon there is, when you're out leading groups or taking people on hikes or whatever, that ladies have their phones out and about. What that is actually meaning is women are being more observant. I'll start that again. What women are actually doing.
I quite like that word, observant.
Observant. Yeah, observant is a word. But yes, that's exactly what they're doing. They're being more, they're taking in what they see far more than a guy who's just tramping along. And I know these are sweeping generalisations. We're fully aware of that before people start bashing and worrying away at their keyboards. But I think it is true. And I think that's what makes ladies, in general terms, better observer photographers.
No, so I think you're right, Ruth. There's clearly women who have got sort of a more creative eye a lot of the time compared to guys. I think guys, for the most part, are way more invested in the technical side of photography. The gear, accumulating that gear, organising your gear, talking about your gear, comparing your gear to someone else's, is a very male-dominated and very male way of approaching a hobby. Collecting, organising. It's something that I've done for a long time.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, so I guess, yeah, so competition is going to probably appeal to men a lot more, which may explain why women aren't necessarily entering photographic competitions. Is there a way that we can encourage, or should we be encouraging women to enter photography competition? Is it a problem?
Not if we want to win, Harry.
Well, yeah.
I mean, is it an ego thing? Do guys in general, maybe, and again, not all guys, obviously, but, maybe they're just more keen to become known, to have people say how great their photographs are. Women maybe just, they've taken it, they enjoy it, they don't care quite so much.
I think one of the things, and again, sweeping generalisation before we get those messages streaming in, although feel free to stream your messages in anyway, we'll ignore the stupid ones, is that men tend to, this is out of the non-professional environment, men tend to take pictures for themselves, women tend to take pictures for others, and I believe that makes them, in my view, a better photographer. Because a photographer, after all, should really, you can of course take pictures of yourself, I'm not saying that's not a thing, but really a really good set of images, or images that will stand the test of time, are generally taken with somebody else in mind at the time. They're the ones that in 10, 15, 100 years' time, you'll look back and you'll think, that's really something special there.
So let me ask you this, James. I was having a look at the analytics for our YouTube channel, and supposedly only 2% of our audience are female. Why do you think that is?
God, you put me on the spot there. I had no idea you were going to ask me that, to be fair. No, I think the part of the reason for that goes back to what you mentioned about that ridiculously long camera name. That is clearly marketed at gents. I would imagine. I mean, they are morons for marketing it in that way. It's the most stupid piece of marketing ever. I think that's part of the reason. So I think stumbling across our YouTube channel is something that guys probably do more, and I think women have better things to do as well. Than I genuinely believe that. I mean, I can actually, for those that are saying, I can actually see Ruth here, so Ruth's rolling her eyes. But I think
you're right. Women are probably busy doing stuff. Men in general are sitting watching YouTube.
Yeah, and I agree, and I would agree. And I know I'm doing down mankind here, and I sound like I'm overly praising women as photographers, but I do genuinely believe that women make better photographers than men for a multitude of reasons. And I think the main reason for that is observation. They look around a lot more. Their minds are not as closed. They're not thinking about, I don't know, whatever it is men think about every 13 seconds, allegedly. So
the Roman Empire.
The Roman Empire, precisely, Harry. But in answer to your question about why, I think the simple answer is why only, which is 2%, did you say, a female?
About that, yeah.
Yeah, okay. I think the simple answer is that the world of photography has not evolved. It's got further to go in terms of reaching the female and women embracing photography in a way. Because on the trips that we run, I'm guessing it's probably 60-40. It's not that far off that, right? In terms of, it's something along those lines. We don't actually have the stats, and I don't think any of us do. But I would guess that it's 60-40 in favour of men to women. So it's getting to parity, really. I just think that in terms of taking in content from photographic magazines, I bet the stats would be the same in photographic magazines and other YouTube channels as well, or other ways of taking on board photographic content. I think it's just there's a little way to go is the answer to that.
So what sort of content do you think, and this is directed to both of you, Ruth, I'd love to hear your input on that. What sort of content would photographically do you think women would like to see more of?
Well, I mean, just going briefly back to what you were saying on the 2%, I would just, just to get practical on that, I think a lot of the time, obviously the analytics on YouTube measure who's logged in and watching. So I think a lot of the time the men are actually the ones logged into YouTube. And I've spoken to a lot of women who say, oh no, we watch it, don't worry, because I've said it's all guys. They go, no, we watch it, but it's my husband's account or whatever, or I'm sitting with them or watching it on telly. Very often it's them that's actually logged in. So I think there are actually a few more women than we think there are. But, in general, women like landscape, women like wildlife. I know plenty of them that do, but I think what James said is people aren't as inclined to maybe sit on YouTube and watch things. And you mentioned as well the workshops, the parity between men and women are getting closer and closer. And I think a lot of the time women aren't as afraid to admit that they don't know something and to come and to be taught something, whether it's by a man or by a woman. Whereas men are probably more likely to read the magazines, to watch the YouTube shows. There's no kind of, not talking about ego again, but there's no loss of ego. You learn something, but you're not admitting that you need to know that thing. And that might sound a bit harsh, but I think in general, the fact that we are seeing women coming to be taught on things like workshops, it shows that they do want to learn, they do want to see these things, they are actually interested. And I think it's too sweeping to say, oh, women would watch something that's more street, or women would watch something that tells you how to photograph a child. I'm not sure that's entirely the case, but practically, maybe women are more inclined to watch things that women present. I've seen that a lot. I've got a few women presenters I enjoy watching, different styles of videos maybe that fit in better into their schedules, into their days. Men, as James said, quite often in general do tend to have a bit more time to sit and watch our long form style of things. But I don't know, it's not an easy one to answer.
Well, I kind of agree with Ruth there, and I think it's only fitting that she should have the last word.
Well, I appreciate that. Thanks, James. Next month's big question will be, should the photo workshop industry be regulated? So looking forward to that and get our thinking caps on. But we're going to move on to our next feature, which is...
What is the point?
The point. What's the point?
Jazzy,
we like it. And again, another technique-related thing we've got going on here. We talked last month about focus stacking, what the point of that was. This is obviously, it's not what's good, what's not, it's you guys' opinion on this. So this month we are talking, what is the point of back button focus? James, go.
Right. Well, the point of back button focus is about the same as the point of which I discussed last time with Marcus, focus stacking. So there's only one person here, Mr. Wildlife himself, the otter boy, eagle man, Harry. Do you use back button focus? Because that's the genre it should all be used in, right?
Well, yes, wildlife is what, if you use back button focus, it's always wildlife photographers shouting about how great a technique it is. Now, on SLRs, I never used it. think it was pointless. And overall, on mirrorless cameras, it's also largely pointless, but I do use a version of back button focus now, in that my front button, my shutter button, is still enabled on normal autofocus, normally set to just a single small focus point, and I can move this around using my joystick. On the back of my camera, I've got my AF on button, and that is enabled to my animal object tracking. So I can switch between the two modes very quickly.
Servo, to be clear, right?
No, so my AI animal detect.
Oh, just simply to the animal detect, which is a piece of software built in, right?
Yeah, so I can then hold down my finger or my thumb on the AF on button, and it will automatically track an animal, hopefully tracking its eye. If I then manage to lose the animal, or the focus doesn't quite nail it, or loses the object a little bit, then I can switch very quickly to my front button as a backup, and I can re-engage the focus with a very small focus point and nail it back onto the animal's head or body. So I use a combination. For anyone that doesn't really know what back button focus is, it was the way of trying to disengage the act of taking a photograph using your front button, the shutter button, and the focusing. So to try and separate those two functions, in that would help you get better focus, and that you'd be able to retain focus on your subject and then recompose your photograph and still take a picture. Because if you used front button focus and you held your finger down and you got your focus over a bird, and then you wanted to position the bird to the side of frame, and then you moved your camera, if you were still holding your finger down on the shutter button to track the subject, you'd all of a sudden lose your focus. So there was a sort of a minor amount of common sense in that we could try and separate the two functions of taking a picture and focusing on the subject, but largely irrelevant even with SLRs, because we can move our focus point around. It's only on the very oldest SLRs as they came in that we were restricted. James, you'll remember these days, the heady antiquity days of only being able to use a
manual focus, you mean?
Well, no, not even that, but just the center focus point with a telephoto lens. So you put a big lens on, particularly with a teleconverter, and the camera would only let you use your center focus point. That's quite difficult then to nail your autofocus if you only got one focus point to choose from. Whereas now we've got the whole sensor to play with. If you're using a mirrorless camera, even with an SLR, we've normally got 112 focus points to play with in some cases, or more.
So with this, Harry, because there's one thing that ties in with it, just very briefly, what metering system are you using this with? Because that also comes into it, because the meter's often tied in. So if you're using priority mode, it will start reading it from where you're focusing. So I'm presuming, with a yes or no, are you using manual metering with this?
Well, yeah, I'm always in fully manual mode, so the metering is largely irrelevant to me.
So that takes away from anything. So separating metering out from focusing, which was another reason people used to do it, having a back button focus is largely irrelevant. So in essence, what you're saying is it's just giving you back button, the button on the back. It's not really back button focusing you're using. You could probably assign that to any other button these days on cameras. Yeah. So you're just having two separate focusing buttons.
Yeah, so that's what I do now, and that's only because I've got this, these animal detect modes. If I didn't have that, I would still be on normal front button focus. I dabbled several times in back button focus, and I just never got on with the technique. There's many wildlife photographers out there that swear by the technique and say if there's the only way to get a pin sharp, perfect photograph of an animal or a bird is to use back button focus, and everything else is irrelevant and is not worthy of taking a picture, which is just nonsense.
So how many times on varying sort of workshops or trips have you picked up someone's camera and forgotten that they've got back button focus on, and then started swearing uncontrollably?
Oh, innumerable times. You pick up the camera and you go, why on earth isn't this working? What have you done? They go, well, it's on back button focus.
And I can guarantee that it's a good job you're here, A, to explain what back button focus is, because both myself and Marcus just completely dismiss it out of hand. But you've actually explained it's not really back button focus what you're talking about anyway. It's actually having two different focus modes pre-programmed to two different buttons. But purely having back button focus where you press it just to enable focus and the front button doesn't enable anything is kind of pointless. And as I said, it's a good job you're here and not Marcus, because there would be a lot of there'd be a lot of editing or bleeping going on, because neither of us see what's the point of back button focus purely. But you have explained that there are, with modern cameras, other ways of using that particular button to assign it to different focus modes, which I think, is fair enough.
Well, maybe people listening have actually got an opinion on this as well. And we have actually put up an image on our social medias, on our Photography Online Instagram and Facebook page. What's the point? Back button focus. If you do have an opinion, hop on there. Let's move on to our final section of the show. Does the world really need this?
Does the world really need this?
All right, well, this is the section of the show where we look at some new gear that has been released over the last little while, or is due to be released, and just ask the question, does the world really need this? We've got a few really quite interesting ones this month, starting off with something that is called, simply and kind of confusingly, unless you're very smart, Paragraphica. Now, I don't know if that's a foreign language or if it's Latin or if it means anything. James, you're kind of the classically trained one. Does it mean anything to you at first hearing?
Well, you could break it down and it would mean something, but in terms of photographic terms, it means absolutely nothing. And on the notes that you sent me, Ruth, it says AI camera after it, which meant I instantly lost all interest in reading any further.
I know. I mean, if you were to go onto this website, and I was going to mention what it was, I'll put it in the show notes instead, because it's a foreign-looking name up the top there. It is an AI camera, and basically what it says at the top of this website, it says Paragraphica is a context-to-image camera that uses location data and artificial intelligence to visualize a photo, in quotation marks, of a specific place and moment. This camera exists both as a physical prototype and a virtual camera that you can try. There is a physical camera, okay, he's basically holding what looks like a black box with a very odd red stripy starbursty bit of plastic in front. And I think the idea is you take it to a location, you point it at the image that is kind of your starting point, and you then tell it with prompts, March 27th, 2017, windy day, whatever, and it takes that base image and does something with it. That's my understanding of it. I don't know, Harry, if you've had a look at this.
Well, I've had a brief look at the website, and to me, it just looks like utter nonsense. It's not. It's just an AI prompt. I mean, it goes over my head a little bit, but I just don't see the point in it at all. And I can't see any information on. Does anyone know what it costs?
I haven't even. To be honest, I'm like you. When I saw AI, I kind of lost interest. But so Harry's opinion, is there a point? No.
I would like to see you, Ruth, holding one of these, and people should go and look at the website, by the way. You said we're going to put the web URL somewhere, didn't we? Yeah. Because it's the most extraordinary looking thing I've ever seen. Of course, as I freely admitted, I didn't bother researching it. But now I've seen it, I'm actually slightly fascinated. So fair enough. But the only thing I would say is that briefly reading through the notes, they should have got, was it ChatGPT or whatever it is, they would have done a better job of writing the text that goes with it.
Well, we can get AI to make a picture of me holding it, because the odds of me actually getting it are probably pretty slim.
Well, the odds of you getting it now are very slim.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry. It looks lovely. Do send me one. Edelkrone have got a motorised video tripod. Who's looked at this, James?
I have looked at it, yeah, and it's got some merit, I suppose. But at the end of the day, all of these, whether it's AI, motorised this, motorised that, I know it's very easy to sound like an old dinosaur and things like that, but it's very hard to beat just trusting your instincts and moving and, just actually using. And I know it's actually designed for other principles, this particular piece of kit, but hands-on doing things yourself, it's very hard to beat that, really. And I know that Marcus would agree with me, but Harry being a generation, should we give you a generation younger, Harry? Just about.
About that, yeah. All I'm hearing is, back in my day, we had to do it manually with my hands. And
I know. Well, yeah, I know. Somebody did accuse me of being your father at Johannesburg Airport once, and that scarred me forever. So, but what do you think?
I actually think it looks quite good. I mean, Ruth, you'll know how difficult some of this video work is, trying to set shots up, get tripods sorted and all the rest. And you can pre-program this with different movements, leveling features, and it doesn't look outrageously cumbersome, awkward, and heavy, which a lot of big video tripods are. I mean, I don't think I would go and spend the money. I don't think I would use the features enough, but I think it would be really useful to people that are actually going and doing a lot of video work and using a lot of the same, camera movements and pans and tilts and things like that. The way you can combine this with the different sliders as well, it's just going to make life that little bit easier, that little bit quicker, and time is money, isn't it? If you don't have to spend half an hour setting up and faffing with the tripod and planning your shot, and you can just get it done, happy days.
I mean, one of the things it says here, even when it's on uneven ground, it automatically levels itself thanks to built-in sensors. I mean, that's not a bad thing. We use Edelkrone, we use a slider for filming the show. It's a fantastic brand. It's very, very useful. It doesn't look like they've gone over the top here, like you said, Harry. They've just built in some things that would actually genuinely be useful. So, depending, I guess, on what your use for it would be. Your opinion, Harry, does the world need it?
I think it does.
Okay, James?
I'm coming round to it actually now. Harry's just, he's done a sales pitch for it, because it basically sounds like it could save me money when I'm out doing commercial work. So i.e. time versus money.
There we are. Well, Edelkrone, if you need a marketer or a promoter, hit me up.
Next product we have seen on the market. I'm not sure if it's on the market yet or if it's coming onto the market. It's a prototype at the moment. Viewfinder Kieran is what I'm going to call it. I'm guessing young people have designed this because they've actually taken all the vowels out of the word viewfinder. So it's actually called VWFNDER. We'll call that Viewfinder Kieran. It's a panoramic digital camera, which, what do we reckon, guys? I
mean, it's got to be good. It was designed in Tokyo. Now, I don't think it's available yet. I think they're building working prototypes either at the end of last year or the start of this year in 2024. And so I will be really interested to actually see it. But it's a panoramic digital sensor. So rather than a normal 3x2 sensor, it is just a purely digital panoramic sized sensor. It's about 60 megapixels. It is only a fixed lens, I think, at 35 millimeters. But if you watch the most recent episode of Photography Online, Marcus made a big song and dance about this particular photograph of lighthouse. It could only be taken on a panoramic camera because of something to do with waves and panning. That's not the only camera. He could go out. If we all club together, I'm sure we could buy him this as a Christmas present.
Yeah, no, it's not going to happen.
And we can finally wean him off all this silly film nonsense and get him onto a proper digital camera.
James?
Well, Harry's kind of hit the nail on the head there, really. We need to get your hands on it, really, and see what it's all about. I suspect it's not quite as good as it says it is, but, benefit of the doubt. And until it's given a good spin, who knows, really? But it's certainly one to keep an eye on, I would say. So does the world really need it? Well, open to debate. Let's see. Maybe.
All right, well, again, we'll put a link to that and people can have a wee look and decide for themselves. Our final one, got to keep the best till last. This is absolutely fantastic. Harry, in fact, why don't you do the honours? What is this camera-related, shall we say, product release that we've got here?
Well, Canon have brought out a lamp and also with an integrated speaker, and it sounds bizarre. And I only recently discovered, just a couple of days ago, that Canon have brought out their their first ever EP, a bit of music. It's an album titled Autofocus, and it's all music designed for helping you to concentrate while you're editing images. And it all sounds really, stupid at first. I thought, I'll have to give it...
Can I just interject, Harry? There's only one thing to help you concentrate while editing images. That's the Photography Online podcast, the YouTube and the live show, okay?
And a cup of wine.
And a cup of wine, thank you. Yes, that does help. Don't tell the clients.
So I did listen to this EP, and it was great for concentrating and really quite well produced. I then noticed in the description of the EP they talked about this lamp.
You are joking.
No, I'm not. This is all.
You've listened to it.
Yeah, of course I have. And then I saw the picture of this lamp. Very minimalistic.
It's cool, huh?
Metal lamp with Canon branded on the. I mean, does the world need this? Absolutely not. It's just as a lamp and it's a wireless speaker. But do I want one? Abso-bloody-lutely.
I know, it looks really, really cool, I have to say. And it kind of, the top bit slides on a kind of camber system. I mean, it does look super cool. I haven't listened to the music because I'm not tragic. When I first saw this on the Canon Rumours website, I thought this was a Canon patent that's just kind of some kind of joke. And lo and behold, they've made it. Why? I have no idea. How many do they sell? I doubt very many at all.
Oh, I think there's going to be a good number of sad people like me.
Reckon? I mean, I have to say, it looks good. It does look super cool.
I'm watching my pennies, and I'll buy one.
How much is it, by the way? Do you know how much it is? I can't see.
It's £269.
Wow.
Just quite a lot of money for a lamp, but it is voice activated.
But it's what, activated?
It's voice activated.
Well, so are you, and you're a lot cheaper.
All right, well, I reckon a really good feature coming up would be what other things camera brands come up with that are not actually really anything to do with photography. But that's a really good place to end.
That's a very good idea, by the way. In fact, people should tell us that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, stick it on our social medias, whatever. Anything else that are just, how on earth are they getting off putting their brand name on this? But I think that's about it for this month's podcast. Coming up in our next main Photography Online show, first Sunday of March, we are going to be carrying on with our National Parks Challenge, Day 2. See how the guys are getting on with my epic UK challenge. We're doing some Astro and Aurora on there as well. Dartmoor, which I'm assuming, James, you have something to do with, being in your neck of the woods.
Yes, with Nick, I believe. I didn't actually know it was in that show.
Can't quite remember. Plus, I'm going to be in Venice, and I'm going to be doing a feature all about 35mm cameras. We've got a couple of different ones, very different ones actually, going to be comparing. So it promised to be a fabulous show. That is the first Sunday of March, so very much looking forward to that. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, James, and Harry as well. Thanks for making the effort, Harry, to brush your hair.
Once a month.
Once a month. James is he's dressed up for the occasion too. So we appreciate the thought, at least, and thanks for joining us as well. And you know what to do. Take good care. But most of all, take good photos.
The Photography Online Podcast.